I search for it, but what is the point of speedrunning this game? What a silly game to speedrun. Some people really need to have a good, hard look at themselves and really think where it all went wrong in their lives. What a waste of your life. This looks like the easiest speedrun I've ever seen. I don't get it. So you speedrunning this game that is literally just about the journey. You're doing this story of the journey. You are life has lost the world. That is actually, why would you want to sit like racing inside a museum? What is the point of speedrunning? Scratch that. If you're watching this video, you likely already know the many reasons why people speedrun games. For the challenge, the satisfaction, the community. But why would anyone with the limited amount of time they have here on this earth speedrun a walking simulator game? Is the point of these games not to just enjoy them? The walking simulator genre is the peak of stopping to smell the roses, where you are meant to take your time, soak in the story, and maybe by the end you'll be left in tears. Speedrunning, by contrast, is inherently about being fast and precise, neither of which are qualities of the walking simulator. So why, oh why, would anyone want to speedrun these games? Well, give me your time, and I will show you not only why many choose these games for their speedruns, but why speedrunning walking simulators is much deeper and complex than you think. The walking simulator is one of the most historically controversial genres in the gaming space. It's quite unique for an entire genre to be so disdained by this many people, and I would love to go into why I think that is, but let's just focus on the basics so we can get to the speedrunning aspect of it. Defining the walking simulator as a genre is kind of difficult, but I would say a game is a walking simulator if the game has a focus on the story, characters, environment, or message. A central purpose of the game is to explore. The game has very few mechanics and is mostly just movement. And finally, this one might be a little controversial, but walking simulator games should be easy. Now, the story doesn't need to be easy to understand, but the game should be easy to progress through. If a game's puzzles are so difficult that one would be spending a majority of the time figuring them out, that's a puzzle game, not a walking simulator. I also want to argue that walking simulators should actually include walking. Games like Arthur's Birthday do not fit this genre. I would just call them point-and-click adventure games. Okay, so with that definition, I think it's reasonable to call LSD Dream Emulator from 1998 the earliest, or at least one of the earliest, examples of a walking simulator. Without going into too much detail, the game is broken up into 365 days, each day containing a dream, and the only purpose of these dreams are to explore. There is no combat, there are no puzzles, there isn't even really a goal, you're just meant to look around. After 1998, there were many other walking simulator games that would go on to influence the genre. These include Yume Nikki from 2004 and Dear Esther from 2008. Dear Esther in particular, I think opened up the gates to what would become the rise of the walking simulator in the 2010s. The 2010s saw a ton of walking simulator games being brought into the spotlight. These include Journey, Gone Home, The Stanley Parable, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, Everybody's Gone to Rapture, Firewatch, and What Remains of Edith Finch, just to name a few. These games garnered a lot of praise, but also a lot of vitriol.
Yikes.
As the walking simulator genre rose, so did a niche gaming hobby called speedrunning. Speedrunning in the early days was quite gatekept. Most sites only allowed for certain games to be showcased, and even rejected many games that went on to be very popular speedruns. In this state, there was no way a game like Dear Esther would have been shown on these sites. But over time, this conservative view of speedrunning would dissipate, and more games were eventually accepted. Kind of. This especially became true with the advent of Speedrun.com in 2014, which hosts nearly every game imaginable on its website, for better or for worse. And of course, walking simulators would be thrown into the mix, becoming a, well, rather small part of the speedrunning community. Gone Home is the game with the most runners, boasting 234 players, although that is likely because of the fact that the game can be beaten in under a minute. The Stanley Parable has 156 runners, Journey 124, Firewatch 49, and Dear Esther with just 5. But don't let these low player counts fool you, because by the end of this video, I'm gonna show you just how interesting these speedruns can be, starting with... If you clicked on this video about walking simulators, there's a good chance you've already played What Remains of Edith Finch. But if you haven't, don't worry, I wouldn't dare spoil it, and for the most part, I'll only be showing you the first 10 minutes of the game, and even then, I'm not focusing on the story, but the speedrun. What Remains of Edith Finch is one of my favorite games of all time, as well as being one of my first to speedrun. In contrast to the few games I had speedrun before, Edith Finch was a breath of fresh air, being far less physically and mentally intensive. The game was fairly simple, being mostly just walking and interacting with objects, emphasis on the mostly. And as I got faster and faster at the speedrun, I eventually wanted to attempt the world record. And when I started trying to optimize the game, I found these little details and strategies that came with it. The game is made up of a dozen or so stories about the protagonist's family, each story detailing the final day of their lives. The first story is about Molly, a young girl who died due to poisoning. Throughout her story, you are transforming into various animals. A cat, then an owl, a shark, and by the end, an octopus monster. And in just this one section of the game, I felt so much joy while finding its little intricacies for the speedrun. For instance, after transforming into a shark, you fall into the ocean and have to chase down a seal. And I would always lose time here against world record, because for the longest time, I thought determining where the seal was located was entirely random. I would search and search around the ocean, spending many precious seconds looking for this seal, who would always seem to be where it was least convenient for me to catch it, always far away in the opposite direction I was searching in. However, what I came to slowly realize was that this seal was a trickster, and I independently found the best strategy to get him was not to search every possible spot I thought he could be in, but to swim forward calmly until a subtle bubble noise played.
Really good.
And whichever direction this noise came from, the left or the right, the seal would always be in the opposite direction of. This revelation felt amazing. This game did not have any sort of guides, and the community was nearly non-existent, so discovering these tiny details in a game I thought was so simple was incredibly satisfying. And that is just one tiny part of the speedrun. There are many more little strategies just like this, like how walking across certain surfaces makes you faster or slower, or how stairs had a strange collision that allowed you to walk on air. And I would never be privy to these obscure facts of the game if I hadn't been speedrunning it. I was having a blast working my way up the leaderboard until... After 2 weeks of running the game, playing it several hours every day, it began to grate on me. The game that I thought was going to be an easy world record became one of the most frustrating speedruns I ever did. Every little movement required perfection. Just turning a couple degrees too far or too early ruined everything. Losing anything more than a second meant a death sentence for my run. And at 35 minutes? That's a long time to be speedrunning a game that is mostly just walking. Running the game went from a relaxing hike through a beloved story to something more sinister, an anxiety-filled trudge through the same hallways, crevices, and graveyards over and over and over, every piece of my movement being scrutinized by a constantly ticking timer. After speedrunning What Remains of Edith Finch for over a month, I gave up. I just couldn't take it anymore, and to this day, I still have not returned to it. And this brings me to... It's obvious that walking simulators are not always the best suited for speedrunning. By their very nature, their movement is mostly restricted to just, well, walking. There are a couple games within the genre that break this pattern, but the limited movement present in most walking simulators make their skill ceiling a lot lower than they otherwise would be, curbing the potential for glitches or boundary breaking. And since most of these games are so linear, more likely than not, you are speedrunning the same route that one would take casually anyways. Without glitches or creative routing, some walking simulator speedruns turn out excruciatingly long. It takes 1 full hour to beat Virginia. Lake is nearly 2 hours long, same for Oxenfree, and Life is Strange? 5 hours! Needless to say, the genre produces some long speedruns. Exasperating this problem is that some walking simulators are very dialogue and cutscene heavy. Speedruns like Night in the Woods are practically text box closing simulators. So then, how? How can walking simulators provide a good speedrunning experience? Why do people even choose to speedrun these games? For some, getting the speedrun world record in a game is like climbing Mount Everest. Why do people climb Mount Everest? Well, because it's there, because it's something challenging to accomplish. Many runners want to be at the top of a leaderboard, whether it be one filled with thousands of players or just 12.
Well, the funny thing about that is I started out running the game. I don't remember playing through it casually at all. One thing about this period of time for me was if there was a game I wanted to speedrun, I would go straight into learning the run for it and then not do a casual playthrough because I really enjoy doing speedruns and learning games quickly more than anything else.
Sometimes, runners even choose to speedrun a game because no one has ever done it before. Not necessarily because it's easier, but rather because it becomes more of an adventure through uncharted territory.
This game was actually my entry into speedrunning back in 2014. Since I played the game directly on release, I saw an opportunity to be the first person to run the game and thereby also route it. I was able to record a run shortly after release, and it was even seen by the developers who reacted to it on Twitter.
As well, some choose to speedrun walking simulators because they are often less stressful than running other games.
I wanted something a little less fast-paced and demanding. Speedrunning Tacoma was really enjoyable and relaxing. I used it as a nice way to wind down after work.
However, many found their simple speedruns of walking simulators to be surprisingly deep and interesting.
The game was actually a lot more fun to run than you would think, with all the little mini-games, hangout sections, platforming, and routing.
Since it was so heavily movement-based, I always sort of felt that need to come back and just be a bit more optimal, and the PB felt that much more rewarding.
The most fun I had speedrunning Ethan Carter was taking part and turning a fairly straightforward walking simulator into an interesting, skillful speedrun.
But for me and many other runners, the main reason that we speedrun these games is because they mean something to us. And because of that, we feel the need to make a sort of tribute to our games.
What Remains of Edith Finch deeply moved me with its story, especially the ending, which brought tears to my eyes. The only thought in my mind when I was finished was, I have to speedrun this game.
It was a game I was very eager to play before it even came out. The visuals of the game are still stunning to this day, but back then it really shocked everyone. I'm a sucker for immersive and atmospheric games, so I was looking forward to it. I played it casually first, and then decided to work on a speedrun.
Around the time when Tacoma first came out, I was playing a lot of walking simulator and narrative-heavy games like The Stanley Parable, What Remains of Edith Finch, and Gone Home. The story and setting of Tacoma really resonated with me. The characters and world building made this station feel like a real, lived-in space. I remember seeing in a video, someone said you should speedrun your favorite game, and Tacoma is for sure up there for me.
In 2020, I was in a deep depression during the pandemic, preparing for an important exam and not enjoying games at all. One day, I couldn't take it anymore and decided to take a break. I looked for something to play and came across Life is Strange.
Now you have me to protect you.
I decided to give it a chance. When I finished episode 1, I loved it and immediately bought the game. By the time I finished it, my life had truly changed.
Feel okay? Chloe, I am awesome. We are awesome.
My depression seemed to vanish all at once, and afterwards, I played the entire series. Although I enjoyed the other games, none of them had the same impact on me. One day, while browsing YouTube, I came across a Life is Strange speedrun video. Curious, I decided to try it myself. When I realized how much I enjoyed it, I continued, and I've been speedrunning for 3 years now. I will never forget the day I finished Life is Strange in under 5 hours. I worked towards this for 3 years, and I'm so happy I finally achieved it.
Imagine this, you just finished a game where the story, characters, or any other sort of aspect of it has left an impact on you. That impact might be as big as changing your whole life, or as small as an experience that will linger in the back of your mind for forever. Either way, the credits roll, and for the most part, you know that you are done with this game. So now what? For some, they can't just simply finish the game and move on. After I played What Remains of Edith Finch, it became one of those games that I thought about at least once a week, and I'm sure you have a game like that as well. I couldn't just play it again, going through the motions. I know what happens in the story, and even though I'll likely enjoy myself, it wouldn't be the same. I needed to make some sort of tribute to this game, a more physical accomplishment than just beating it, so I speedran it, and there are many others that have done the same thing for their game. Throughout this video, I've been tiptoeing around the idea that these speedruns of walking simulators have more going on beneath the surface than you would think. And now, I would like to show you just some of the amazing glitches and strategies used by speedrunners for these games. Just like with Edith Finch, I don't expect you to have played or even to have heard of all these games. Rest assured, I will not be spoiling anything, only showcasing small parts of some of the incredible speedruns these walking simulator games have. Starting with, in Firewatch, there's a glitch called memory overload, which causes all the dialogue in the game to be rapidly skipped over, something that you can't ordinarily do. It's done by saving and loading the game over and over and over and over, like several minutes of saving and loading, but it's worth it because it shaves a massive 12 minutes off your time. In Life is Strange, you need to get into a barn and its subsequent basement. This would normally take several minutes, but by climbing up this inconspicuous sign, you can get out of bounds and fall out of the world. After running for about 30 seconds towards the barn, you clip right into its basement. In Yume Nikki, while in the dream world, you can ride a bicycle that doubles your speed. Obviously, pretty good for speedrunning. However, there's also a glitch that quadruples your speed. By sitting in this chair, opening the menu, equipping the bicycle, and then pressing down while exiting the chair, Madosuke runs at 4 times her normal speed. In The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, a strong river current blocks you from progressing further. Ordinarily, you'd have to go through a few sequences to open this path, but by using a variety of specific movements, you can actually clip out of this elevator and skip over the river by slowly walking along an invisible barrier that the world record holder describes as, quote, thin as paper. This glitch is very precise, and only the world record holder has ever gotten it in a run. In Layers of Fear, to progress through the game, you need to trigger all of the haunting events that can occur in each required room. This leads to some very interesting strategies as runners attempt to activate these events as efficiently as possible. In the kitchen, for instance, the runner will open both of these cupboards to make an apple fall from a painting, before shaking the mouse rapidly to activate several more events, like a knife being thrown at the door. The shaking of the mouse is needed because the game only plays events after a certain amount of mouse movement is detected. In Night in the Woods, during one of the hangouts with Greg, you need to take the battery out of a car. You are meant to avoid electrocution by choosing the white wire, but pulling at the red wire is actually faster because it electrocutes you. It causes May to black out, ending the scene early and saving some time. In Jazz Punk, there's a trash bin that crawls on the wall like a spider when you click on it. It's meant to be a quick gag, but speedrunners actually use it to skip a huge part of the level. Speedrunners let the trash bin carry them up the wall and then jump before alt-tabbing out of the game. When they come back into the game, they are flown far and outside of the map. This is called a super jump, and it's used to fly over to this area over here without going through any other sequences. And finally, in the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, you are not usually allowed to jump. However, in a satirical part of the game, the player is allowed to jump, but only within the designated jump circle. Very funny. However, speedrunners are actually able to exploit this. By pausing at the exact same moment they exit the jump circle, runners gain the ability to jump wherever they want for as long as they want. And since the game is obviously not built to support jumping everywhere, this glitch allows for a ton of exploits. If you were someone that was doubtful about the legitimacy of speedrunning walking simulators, I hope I was able to change your mind. Granted, these speedruns will likely never be as deep as a speedrun game like Mario 64 or Portal or Minecraft, but these walking simulator games mean a lot to people, and these runners have went above and beyond to optimize a game that most people wouldn't even consider speedrun worthy. I want to thank all the runners who took the time to answer my questions about their speedruns. They gave me valuable insight into why they decided to speedrun the walking simulator genre, and I learned about a lot of cool speedruns I never heard of before in the process. This video is quite different from any other video I've ever made, so I would really appreciate any feedback in the comments. Did you like this video? Is this pseudo video essay format something you'd like to see more from me in the future? I am still experimenting with this channel, and I would be thrilled for it to be a space to talk about the more niche corners of the speedrunning world. And with that, I'll see you in the next speedrun.